Hello friends, your buddy Jeff here with another video. Disclaimer time, this video will not contain any records or any discussions about music. So if you're not interested in Stephen King or Joe Hill books, turn back now. Just feel the need to tell you that, just to not waste anyone's time. So disclaimer's done. So for those of you who are still here, welcome. I have 5 books to show. One of them I just finished just about an hour ago. And yeah, this is another episode in my occasional series called the Stephen King Reading Project. Quick recap, what I've been doing for almost a year now. I think I started doing this late last year. Was alternating between Stephen King books that I hadn't read before and wanted to revisit. That part has been completed. The King books that I haven't read, got them all. So now I'm alternating between King and his son Joe Hill, whose back catalog of books I've acquired. So there's actually 3 Hill books and 2 King. It's just the way the alternating has gone. So I've got that to talk about, and then a few brief words about my future plans in this project. So let's get right to it. First, I'm starting off with Joe Hill. His very first book, a short story collection called 20th Century Ghosts. I've found, well, when I get to the last Hill book, I'll give you some of my general impressions of what I'm noticing with Joe Hill's writing. This is a short story collection, collecting up stories written in like the early 2000s. I think this actually came out in 2006 or 7. But this would be a really great place for a new reader to start if they were curious about Joe Hill. Just because of his familial relationship to his dad. If you were curious to see if the son could write as well as the father, this would be an excellent place to start because these stories are all excellent. Running a variety of mostly dark fantasy, a few edge into horror territory, but they're all very sharply written, very paced very well. You won't get bored reading this book. And all the stories are all probably no more than 20, 25 pages each. So it's just the back cover. Yeah, this is an excellent place to start with Joe Hill. So I enjoyed this book quite a lot, and it was a really fast read. And it's also not that long. It's only like just over 300 pages, I think. So if you were looking to dip your toe into the Joe Hill universe to see what he's all about, my recommendation would be to start here, which is his first book anyway. So if you're like me and you want to read an author's catalog, you always want to start at the beginning. But this is an excellent beginning for his writing career. So I enjoyed this one quite a lot. Then we alternate back to Mr. King. This was his book, his nonfiction book, called Danse Macabre. Came out in 1981. Here is a photo of the man, circa 1981, with a big beard. This is basically King's survey of horror fiction, movies, TV shows from like 1950 to 1980. So yes, it's very dated. This book is over 40 years old now. You know, would love to see him revisit this and update it. King is pretty insightful with, the conventions of horror fiction, obviously, being such a famous author who started in that genre and branched out since. But it was nice to read There's a lot of index in here and glossary. So, I mean, even though it's not a super large book by any measure, but, you know, it was a nice change of pace from his fiction to get some of his thoughts on horror. And some of the books he read, actually, when I first read the paperback of this, which I have, he introduced me to a couple of books that I wanted to pick up. Primarily, the writing of Richard Matheson, who wrote books like I Am Legend, The Shrinking Man, Hell House. He wrote for the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone. He wrote like Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. You know, the famous episode with William Shatner and the little bear on the wing. The premise is great. Just the execution is very dated, obviously. Although the Twilight Zone movie that came out in 82 or 3 remade that episode, which was a lot scarier and a lot more effective. But just to give you an idea of who Richard Matheson was a big influence on King and his writing too. So it was nice to read about that, or reread it in this case. Is it essential? Maybe. I mean, if you're only interested in his stories, probably not. If you're completist, then yeah. I mean, he wrote a couple of nonfiction books. He wrote this. He wrote On Writing, which I may reread at some point in the future. I want to say he did like a baseball book, didn't he? Or he contributed to a baseball book, nonfiction. I forget. But in any case, this was a pleasant diversion. It didn't take me very long. But like I said, it's if you're looking for anything past 1980, forget it. It's not going to be in this book. So, it's just because it's so old. What can I say? Then we return to Joe Hill. His first novel, Heart-Shaped Box. Also, very on the thinner side. This is it's like a revenge novel. It's a supernatural revenge novel. Judas Coin is a metal rock star who is known for collecting all kinds of weird things, and his assistant comes across an auction to buy a ghost. A ghost was up for auction. So him being the eccentric collector of things that he is, he tells his assistant to buy it, and a heart-shaped box arrives in the mail containing a suit. And once he opens that box and pulls out the suit, he starts seeing a ghost. Of course, nobody else can see it but him, and the ghost starts doing bad things. Yeah. He doesn't mess around with the plot. He gets right to it. He gets right to the action. He gets right to the main idea of what this book is about early on. So there's not a whole lot of setup the way his dad can be at times. World building and setting things up, before he finally gets around to the actual premise. It's not the case here. He gets right to the action early, and the rest of the book is just how Judas Coin deals with living with the ghost and trying to get rid of the ghost. So this was another book that was pretty well written. Like I say, it's short, so he doesn't wander off into the weeds on, sidetracks with the story. And the ending was pretty good. I won't spoil it, but it was satisfactory, I should say. It didn't make me go, come on, So for a first novel, this was also an excellent book. This was also be an excellent introduction to Joe Hill's fiction. And I like this one quite a lot too. So I was pretty happy with this one. Then, book number 4, back to Mr. King. I reread Christine, his novel from 1983, about a haunted car. There he is on the back. sitting on the hood of a 58 Plymouth Fury, which is the car that is known as Christine in the book. I don't know how popular the movie still is compared to the book. I seem to remember like a lot of the visuals when I read this still come from the movie. But where the movie depicts Christine as a car that was like born bad, like right off the assembly line, this book is different. It makes Christine kind of like the receptacle for an angry owner, because Roland LeBay, who was Christine's owner before Arnie Cunningham buys it off of him, ends up haunting this car. And a lot of bad things happened in this car while Roland owned it, which we learn about. And so it's more of a novel of more like possession, because you see Arnie change over time from the, pimply faced nerdy kid in high school to a pretty confident masculine man. But unfortunately, he's possessed by the spirit of LeBay. So he ends up being just a vessel for LeBay to like come back to life almost in a way. And it's all connected through the car. So, very well written. It's kind of hinky. It starts off in first person because Dennis Gilder, who is Arnie's friend, is the narrator until he gets injured in a football game and he's in the hospital for months at a time. So then the book in the middle kind of flips to third person, and Dennis is, because he's not in it, and so he can't tell us what actions occur. And then at the end of the book, the last section, it flips back to first person Dennis as he gets out of the hospital. So I guess that's not unusual, having shifting perspective in a novel, but it's just kind of hinky. That's all. Still a well-written book. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I read this when it came out. This came out in '83. I want to say I read it probably the following year in the paperback. I had the paperback edition and still had the same kind of cover. So, it was almost like reading a brand new book because it's been so long. But I enjoyed this one quite a lot. And I liked how King started every chapter with a quote from a car song, like a rock and roll car song. So that was kind of amusing. And for King, the book ended satisfactorily, I thought. I enjoyed the ending. So if you're looking for some classic 80s King, you couldn't do much better than getting Christine. I'll probably put this in the top 20, maybe top 25 of his books. It's not up there with his all-time classics, but it's a good mid-level, I'd say, King read. So well worth the time and effort. And again, not a huge time commitment. It was like just over like 400 pages. So pretty interesting. Pretty good. Now, the book I just finished this morning is another Joe Hill book called Horns. Now here's where I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm noticing in a general way about Joe Hill's writing. Because I've read all of his books except one, which will factor into my future reading plans, which I'll tell you about. This is his second novel. And it's about a guy who, his name's Iggy, wakes up one day after a drunken binge with horns coming out of his head. And the horns have powers. It gives him abilities to do things. Basically, everyone who comes in contact with him falls under the spell of the horns and tells them their secrets. Or if he touches them, kind of like in the Dead Zone, if he touches them, he's able to see things they've done in the past, usually bad things they've done, whoever that person might be. He's able to influence people to a certain degree. Like, he can't force them to do anything they really don't want to do. But if they kind of are like looking for permission maybe to do something, and because they're too shy to do it, he's able to like influence them and push them to do it. And then later in the book, of course, his skin starts turning red, and his horns grow, and he's able to breathe smoke and heat. Not quite fire, but heat. So this guy's literally turning into a devil, to put it in the classic image of what the devil looks like. Here's just the back cover. I like this book. I didn't like it as much as Heart-Shaped Box or 20th Century Ghosts. Still an enjoyable read, about 2/3 of the way. The ending is pretty vague. We never really learn how he got the horns. I mean, he alludes to a few things at like the very, very end as to how he got them, but it's never really clearly explained. It's really kind of left up to the reader if they care enough, I suppose. And the thing that I've noticed about a lot of Joe Hill's writing, especially in novel form, not so much short story, but his main protagonist, whoever that might be in that book, usually gets the shit beat out of him multiple times in that book. It happened in Heart-Shaped Box with Judas. It happens here. It happens in another book of his, actually the first one of his I ever read, called The Fireman. But the main character, or the hero, or the protagonist, whatever you want to call it, gets the crap beat out of him mightily before finally hitting upon like either a lucky event or something happens for them to finally triumph in the end. And then usually the villain, or whoever it is, their demise is usually very quick and unsatisfying. That's what happened here. It's okay. It's just a tick that I'm noticing in a lot of Hill's books. He's also written a lot of comics. I haven't read any comics by Joe Hill. I've read just about all of his books. I only have one more to go, and I'll be caught up with him. Like I said, just like in Heart-Shaped Box, he gets right to it. The very first chapter is where the guy wakes up and finds the horns growing out of his head. And the rest of the book flashes back between events that occurred between him and the villain, who is his friend in the book, and then eventually turns against him. It's... the plot kind of gets bogged down with flashbacks. So I was hoping for more with Iggy, dealing with the horns and his changing appearance, more than the flashbacks with his friend and other people in the past. That's just me. Still a good read. I mean, it's still a good book for the most part. I just thought it could have used a little bit, like more fleshing out. Like I said, it's also like 350, 360 pages. I actually wouldn't have minded it being like 50 or 100 pages longer, just to kind of flesh things out a little bit more. So, this book really reminds me of some of King's books from like the mid-90s, early 2000s, where he has an idea, but he doesn't quite know how to execute it enough to make it work. Just my opinion. Overall, I've really enjoyed Joe Hill's books, but I'm hoping in the future his style shifts, because this is like the third time now where I've read about the main character getting beat up sick, whatever, and barely scraping by in the end to win out. So I know he's never going to see this video, but Joe, you got to change it up a little bit. You got to make things a little bit more different here. Just my opinion, but overall, Horns was a worthy read. I'm glad I read it. There you go. 5 books in 20.5 minutes. It's not too bad. From here, I'm going back to reading a King book. It's actually a Richard Bachman book. I'm going to pull the Bachman books collection out, and I'm going to read The Long Walk. That's what I think that's the next thing I'm going to do. Then, you can see on my shelf right there, I don't know how close you can see it, but the Nosferatu is the last Joe Hill book that I have not read. That's the book on the end there next to the vase. And then after that, I'm going to gear up to go back onto the Path of the Beam, and I'm going to give The Dark Tower a reread. Now, I'm not going to do all of the books. I'm certainly not going to read books 6 and 7 again. I own them, but I don't ever see myself rereading them. I have them just for completism. That's the only reason why I've got them. But I do plan on getting through the first 4 and Wind Through the Keyhole, which was a Dark Tower related novel that came out after the series ended. I think that came out in like 2012. So those 5 I'm going to plan on reading. Maybe I'll do Wolves of the Calla. We'll see. I just know that Dark Tower 4 is mostly flashback story. Wind Through the Keyhole is also a flashback story with young Roland. Good stories, but it really, really, really bogs the plot down. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna get into 5, because I know that a big chunk of that book deals with the backstory of Father Callahan from Salem's Lot, what happened to him after he left Salem's Lot, how he shifted over into Midworld. I remember enjoying that book. Not really enjoying the ending, but I think by the time King had gotten that far, it wasn't really about the ending, it was about the journey. So, and that's really what the Dark Tower is all about anyway. But I know you can see there, probably not too close, but I ended up picking up hardcover editions of 1 through 4. I found a hardcover of Dark Tower 4 at a half price. So that kind of inspired me to try to track down the other 3 in hardcover. And what I didn't know was that they'd been reissued years ago in hardcover. So, like, the original first edition of The Gunslinger, say, that came out in 1982, is worth, over $1,000 now. You can't put your hands on it for almost less than $1,000. Even crappy condition ones go for like $700-800. From everywhere I've seen, beside eBay, there were a couple other booksellers I looked at online, and it's just too expensive. The soft cover I have, which is fine, but I was very pleased to see that the first 4 had been reissued. The copy of Gunslinger I have in hardcover is the revised edition, which adds a little bit more material to the story to kind of update it slightly. King did that in 2003, I believe. So I'm going to read that, but I'm also going to keep my original soft cover that's not been updated. So basically the 4 soft covers I have I'm going to keep, because those are illustrated. 2, 3, and 4 were all illustrated, whereas the brand new reissues are not. So, and then I'm going to rearrange my shelves to put all the Dark Tower books in one section all together, instead of having them scattered in publication order like I do now. It's the psycho thoughts just going through my head, All right. So that's pretty much what my plans are for the future. I think once I get to Dark Tower, I'm probably not going to alternate. I'm probably going to try to read them all back to back, because originally I read the series in real time, and there were very long waits between each book. You know, we're talking like 6-7 years between each one, just about. So reading them back to back with no delays between them, I'm hoping will enhance the enjoyment of the storytelling. So those are my plans. So thank you for making it this far. If you watched all the way through, I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back next time with records and music. Until then, it's your buddy Jeff. Stay on the path of the beam. Talk to you guys later. Take care.